So, honoured guests and colleagues, thank you for giving me your time. I'm going to try and do a bit of a whistle-stop tour. So, 4 years into being a CISO at BT, and my golly, isn't it quite an exciting time to be a CISO? There I was coming over in the Eurostar yesterday morning, and splash, WPA2 weakness. So I'm sure many of us, many of you, are now working with your teams to work out the vulnerability and how that particular risk is going to impact our companies and our customers. So it's ever the agile moment being a CISO. So what I want to do is to run through this agenda, but in a very pacey sort of way. So BT has taken an unusual step of actually amalgamating its protecting itself, support to governments globally, and commercial go-to-market into one team. And so that gives us quite a lot of expertise and know-how in tradecraft technology, and we can use that to aggressively go to market. The context, you all get this context. Organizations are still grappling with what is the cyber threat, what do we need to do about it to counter some of the scary statistics that we can all see online. And it's all very hard. How do you convey that hard message to companies' boards and seek investment into IT improvements and basic hygiene, as well as what I would call the top-end cyber analytics capability? So the threat actors were very familiar with the context that shapes our environment. And certainly some of these shape our environment, make it very difficult to navigate. And it applies threats and opportunities to our companies and to the citizens in each of our jurisdictions. So many of us quantify the threats and opportunities around actors into a diagram that looks something like that. So at BT, we've experienced attacks from all forms of the four quadrants, from nation states to serious criminalities, to terrorists and to hackervists, and combinations thereof, because they're very smart, that set of four quadrants, and they collaborate and cooperate when they need to do their dastardly deeds. And they do their dastardly deeds. Serious criminality has lots of money to be made from exploiting you and I and the products that we try and sell to customers and customers themselves. But the flip side of all of that threat vectors is the opportunity that living on and in an age of increasing Internet of Things provides to us as companies in terms of how can we work with citizens and companies to actually help them to be better protected. So there's a bit of a yin and a yang, a balancing act between the threat on one side and the opportunity on the other. And I'm sure many of us recognize, and certainly from protecting BT, there's always this concern that I have as CISO as to how much do we go and talk about what we do and how well we do it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because that can in itself attract attention, and the old cyber paradox kicks in. Why don't we go after somebody who says and portrays and has evidence that they're good at cybersecurity? It becomes a challenge. Whereas the burglar walking along a street who sees a house with cameras and burglar alarms will probably move on to the next house because it's too much of a challenge. The opposite happens in cybersecurity. So the landscape that we face then as BT. So BT has a ringside view of the telecommunications networks that we have ourselves and we provide for customers. And because we know and own the pipework, then it gives us an ability for legitimate business purposes to collect data, to watch flows as it transits our networks, and to intervene when we spot anomalous behavior. And we do that ourselves, we do that in partnerships with our many friends. Cisco, just up, is one of those friends as well. And we do that in a very real-time way. And certainly, like many of you, we've suffered many ongoing DOS attacks, and it's only in collaboration with our partners that we can actually throttle at the furthest edge of our networks to try and sinkhole traffic when it's coming at us in an unfriendly way. So at BT, when I first joined, I wanted to understand the scope of the threat surface that I was in charge of, and that surface which I was trying to protect those four quadrants of actors coming at. And This is my onion diagram. You, I'm sure, have an equivalent onion diagram, but it starts at the beginning with most of the heavy lifting core IT and networks in the UK, and it moves outwards radially to equipments that we place on customers' sites, and everything in between. We consume cloud, we sell cloud, we acquire companies. How good are their security as well as ours? And we also worry about our supply chain. Like many in this room, we have a voluminous, rich variety of a supply chain, and how good are they? So, like many, I've got a team of 500 people. That's quite a fixed cost for BT, but that's the scale of investment that BT Group has decided it's going to place to try and risk manage the threats and protect the information and the systems that are key to us. And underpinning that, given my background, of course, is a vision and a heartbeat that's intelligence-led cyber operations. So I have a large appetite for acquisition of data from our own networks and systems, from partners, and from government entities. And Paul Chich was up here earlier. We work hand in glove with the National Cybersecurity Centre in the UK, but also with other jurisdictions. And we try and triage and create a situational awareness picture that gives us eyes onto what's happening across a number of areas of threat, whether it's malware or whether it's DDoS. Again, you have probably the same approach. So what keeps CISOs up at night? Well, I can tell you there's 5 things that keep me up at night. I worry about service impacting events that can take down the broadband services in the UK and beyond, our MPLS networks, our rich over-the-top services, having recently acquired EE, worrying about 4G mobile coverage in the UK and its support to the law enforcement agencies, for example. I worry about data being thieved from BT, either by an insider trying to get it out or an outsider who gets in trying to pull it out. So what defense and depth capabilities do I have to ensure are in place to try and minimize that risk? Not wipe it out completely. Lots of people will say, if you only buy that box, I can guarantee 100% that you'll be free from cyber attack. We know the reality of that situation. That's not true. And I've talked about supply chain. It's a big, big issue. And with the, May next year, May 2018 is looming fast in terms of GDPR. And how good are we in terms of talking to our supply chain about their readiness for GDPR requirements, never mind our own? And then, of course, I'm worrying about basic hygiene. In BT, how good are we at basic hygiene? Understanding our estate, asset inventory, patch status, vulnerability scanning. Can I understand where that weakness is coming in real time? You might have a similar list of 5 or more or less. That's my 5, and that's what keeps me sweating at night sometimes. So, how do you talk geek to a board? So a board that's typically full of, if you're lucky, maybe the odd technologist, but full of accountants, marketing people. So you've got to try and translate that geek into language of the board. So that's bottom line, that's risk. So what I've come up with, what we've come up with, is a simple dashboard which at the heart has risk. So if you focus on the red to green risk diagram, likelihood impact, or if you come from the coast like I do, green is solid land, where the golf courses are in Scotland, and red is deep sea. So you don't want to find your risk in deep sea. When I joined, we were tracking 25 risks. Important things for the business. Physical security, supply chain, sensitive data. We've boiled that down into a more tractable 8 key risks. And I have people whose sole job it is to understand that risk from top to bottom, and then decide if we're doing enough, too much, or too little in terms of mitigating against it. So risk is at the heart of the BT journey in terms of effective cyber containment and remediation. And at the top, it's about data. I can present data to our board which says, this is the attacks that have happened and we've had to react to, which is the blue, and the green is proactively finding out from having large quantities of data and intelligence-led cyber operations, where we can intervene before damage could happen to us. And an earlier speaker talked about the benefits of hackers. So I'm thankful that I've got 100 hackers in my team, and they're used very aggressively to do the standard penetration testing of services and systems that we sell or consume ourselves, but they do something else. That team is trained to do physical and IT red teaming in a very aggressive way. And so we found that incredibly illuminating, finding weaknesses that we had missed. And so we've moved from what I would call a dusty old compliance regime to a far more interventionist hunter-gatherer approach to finding badness on our estate and taking decisive action. And when it requires investment, then we seek that investment based on factoids, on data. So I'm not going to go through risk in detail, but so often I'm asked a question by, never mind internal BT, but by clients and customers who I speak to as a practitioner, well, how do we actually bundle up what's the most sensitive data systems and work out how we and should protect it? And it's back to basics. It's a simple risk management approach to understanding what's very important to your company or your government department or entity. And only when you've gone through that cycle can you then decide how you're going to improve and what level of investment you need to improve it. So like many, we have an agile governance approach assessing risk. And many people will say, governance is a terrible word, it's terribly boring, I'm going to go off for lunch. The trouble is, governance is a good word for cybersecurity because you better make sure, in my experience, that you have governance agile enough to run at the pace of an incident when it's happening. And by the way, you better have a set of playbooks in place. Otherwise, you'll be scratching your head when the WPA2 news broke yesterday. What do we do next? And if you're not doing black swans, if you're not practicing for the next WannaCry or NotPetya or another DDoS attack, what are you doing as a cybersecurity community? You need to practice, and you need to practice often. So what about BT's risk then? So I joined back in 2014. The cyber risk was amber, apparently. Well, it's been red since. And it's red because as much as we now understand the threat landscape, and we understand the actors and their con-ops and their modus operandi, we also understand better the extent to which we know our own estate and some of its weaknesses. Because we all suffer from end of service life. We all suffer from sweating our assets. The difference is we now need to apply that understanding against the real threat in the moment and decide, do we need to intervene? And at BT, like many back in the 90s, we went to flat everything, flat networks, consolidation, taking cost out. The trouble now is a cyber event can detonate in a flat network and take out a lot of services. So in a sense, it's back to the past. It's back to compartmentalization, micro-compartmentalization, and trying to reduce the blast radius of any cyber incident when it goes off. So for some time, I suspect it's still going to be red, and it's also going to be red because the pace and mutation rate of the actors coming up with new devilish techniques actually can outrun us. And it is a bit of an arms race. It's not a nice term to use, but it is, and we're always running to keep up. So, taking risk, taking the threat surface, taking the threat landscape, like many, BT sets a threshold. How much is BT prepared to have to insure itself to contain a cyber event? And so the blue bars represents relatively the risk appetite of BT. The red bars are incidents that either happen to BT or in the environment that drive up the risk appetite, and the green is the mitigations we then apply to drive it back down. And this is done in a very real-time basis. And my modernization program is called Citadel. And it's called Citadel because it's defense in depth. People talk about building castles and walls, but what we're about is defense in depth techniques based on intelligence at the heart, pushing forward our understanding of where we should intervene. So my team of 500 is quite a simple team construct. There it is. On the left, we have risk. On the right, we have a very energized set of cyber specialists who have unlocked themselves from the security room and joined the rest of the business to try and help them enable and win their business. So we have people embedded from my security team in the business, helping them to be successful in their business, as opposed to the old attitude of risk, which was, no, the answer is no, never mind what the question is. This is about plugging the security team into the business. And the piece in the middle is the hunter-gathering, the proactive, preemptive, the 100 hackers, along with the incident handling teams, along with our very proactive and curious discovery teams that go globally across the BT estate to find out, is policy being followed in a very proactive global policeman view. And talking about how do we attract and retain people like 100 hackers or good, experienced cybernauts now and for the future. So at BT, the playground is a worldwide telecommunications infrastructure. Tell a hacker who is ethical, that's their playground in which they can prosecute and develop their tradecraft. And although we pay them well, they could go off somewhere else, I'm sure, and get much more. But that playground is a fantastic opportunity for them and a draw in keeping retention high. And so we use all those techniques to try and entice people in and develop their careers. So you might have a similar construct if you run security. You might do more with partners, more with managed services than having 500 internal people. But that's been my recipe and my vision in the 4 years that I've been at BT. And at the heart of it, and I've already given the hint, it's about having an intelligence-led operation because there's just too much to survey manually and to eyeball. So rich metadata against which we can launch smart analytics to discover the true status of our enterprise or to discover unusual flows and to intervene if necessary. That is at the heart of my philosophy and my team's philosophy, and also at the heart of BT's philosophy. And it's quite a simple team. There's no magic to this. First line, second line, third line. Make it operate in real time. Make it produce data that can inform the business as to how it should react. So Citadel then, just rounding off, is that modernization program. And so all that I did was to take the threat surface of BT, which was the onion diagram, and overlay it with 8 key modernization areas that we've pursued over the last 4 years. From compartmentalization to aggressively scanning our networks outside in and inside out, because if you're connected to the internet, you all know this, that's where a lot of the threats are going to come from, as well as understanding threats from insiders, of course. And all we do is a rolling 2-year revitalization of that program to help us. So finally then, you probably have what I would call an elevator pitch diagram in your pocket. So when your CEO bumps into you and says, "You're a fixed cost of my business, what are you doing to protect BT?" I've got some means and method of very quickly helping him to understand the impact that we have to protect BT and to protect BT's customers. So that's all I've got to say. I'm happy to take any questions in the couple of minutes left.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Les. Much appreciated. We have a little bit of time to take a question for Les, and I'm tracking the app questions, and I'm seeing you're all very shy electronically, so I'm hoping that you're going to be a little bit more comfortable asking a question from the floor. So if there is a particular question anybody would like to target at Les, I'm looking for a hand. I see one there. Now, for those who are not familiar with this, we've saved money and we've become a lot more efficient to have people wandering around with microphones. Some of you may have seen this catch box before, and I know Ian well, so I know he can catch. So if I throw that to him and put it on your lap and just talk into that black spot, Ian, you have the floor. Question from Ian West.
Well, listen.
Yeah, I know Ian. Hi, Ian.
Hi, Les. Isn't this clever? I'll throw it back in a moment. Les, I've got a question, and it's about the concept of operations centers. Within NATO, we really see the need for an integrated network operations center where all of the disciplines of network operations, including, of course, security, are integrated, working together, working side by side. But I see a lot of industry still talking about security operations centers or cyber operations centers. What are your views on this integration? Do you really think that the security operations center, apart from the network operations center, is the ideal model?
No. So my having lived this for 4 years, an integration of NOC and SOC is definitely the way to go. Now, how you achieve that can range from physical co-location through to virtual co-location. And so where we are at BT, we're more at the virtual teaming. So at the moment in BT, there is a security and threat analysis group running on the WPA2. And that has experts from the networks teams, from the business, and from the security teams, press, legal, on a bridge. It's completely open. It's a 24/7 bridge until we track this down in terms of what's the extent of the impact and when are the patches going to come and how do we then pass those patches out to our customers, never mind our own infrastructure. So the answer to the question is I favor an integration of NOC and SOC. And what I desire most in my team is network expertise. Because when attack happens, I need people in my team who understand the networks of BT and how they've been put together. Now, I'm not saying that I would absorb them into my team, but I need to access those experts. And I must admit, having moved from GCHQ where, when I was in the skiff of the donut, that was it. And when I got home, you had to go back to the donut. With BT, it was almost like my arms and legs were reattached, because I can have 24/7 live bridges up to a certain classification in real time. And so in order to run at the pace of the internet, in a non-classified sense, having that level of integration is beneficial. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Thank you very much, Les. Thank you very much.